I bet that before the disqualification announcement came out, you thought Lewis Hamilton's brilliance was the star of the show in Austin. Second in the sprint, second in the Grand Prix, the perfect weekend considering Max Verstappen's form. Well, unfortunately, that couldn't be farther from the truth. Mercedes and their star driver made a huge number of errors over the weekend, and Hamilton should have finished the race in first place. Want to know what went wrong for Hamilton this weekend, apart from the obvious? Then don't go anywhere. The seven-time world champion Lewis Hamilton was disqualified from the United States Grand Prix after finishing second in Sunday's race. His Mercedes failed a physical floor and plank inspection following the race at the Circuit of the Americas racetrack in Texas. Ferrari's Charles Leclerc was found guilty of the same offense and disqualified from his sixth-place finish. Up until a few hours after the Grand Prix finished, it was undoubtedly Mercedes' best race of the season. George Russell may have not been on the pace, but Hamilton looked seriously competitive on Sunday against the indomitable Max Verstappen. But the reason for Hamilton's disqualification rendered any conclusions about his performance completely irrelevant, in a car that featured an upgrade which he said had made a significant difference to his behaviour. The upgrade on the Mercedes was a new floor which Hamilton said had transformed his balance. But did it actually make a difference, or was the perceived improvement caused by Mercedes running their car too close to the ground? All year, Hamilton and teammate George Russell have been complaining about the car's lack of rear grip, which they say has robbed them of the confidence they need to commit to corner entry. This is where Hamilton said the car had improved. "The step we were able to take this weekend has given me a little bit more confidence in the car to throw it into the corners," the seven-time champion said. "I really enjoy driving around this track. There are still some of the fundamental issues we're having with the car, which won't change until next year. But it was really positive to feel the step we had taken. Maybe it was only 0.1 seconds upgrade, but there was at least 0.1 seconds of confidence it gave me. It's quite interesting when you see what happens when you do have those. It's like a double knock-on effect." An added benefit was that the upgrade had improved the car's relative performance compared to its rivals in areas of the track where its weaknesses were most highlighted, the high-speed corners. In Japan, 2 races ago, the Mercedes was uncompetitive through Suzuka's S's compared to all other front-running cars. But in the S's at Austin this weekend, which are quite similar in nature to those at Suzuka, in being a series of high-speed changes of direction, the Mercedes was competitive. As team principal Toto Wolff put it, "It was our best sector." What Mercedes will not know until next weekend's Mexican Grand Prix at least is whether running the car low enough to contravene the rules on skid block wear had an effect on these gains. Insiders at the team admitted that the mistake they made would have made some difference to the car's performance. Running the car too low to the floor was Mercedes' first mistake. We don't know how much of the plank was worn. It may have been just on the cusp of legality, or it could have been so far past legality it can't even see the rule anymore. But it was far from the team's only mistake of the weekend. There was another very obvious one that I'm about to talk about, but there were more that I'll cover later in the video as well. So, Mercedes' second mistake. Before the disqualification, the focus at Mercedes was on a race hampered by strategy errors. Hamilton was running second behind McLaren's Lando Norris as the first pit stops approached, with Verstappen just under 5 seconds behind. When Norris and Verstappen pitted, Mercedes chose to try for a one-stop strategy, confident that tyre degradation was lower than normal. It was a decision based on the superiority of the Red Bull this season, and the fact that if they'd locked in track position a few seconds ahead of Verstappen on normal form, he would have passed them anyway. The one-stop, they felt, was something different that might give them a chance. But within 2 laps, Hamilton's tyres had fallen off a cliff, and he had to pit just 3 laps after Norris and 4 after Verstappen. You might think that 3 or 4 laps wouldn't make that much of a difference, but they were catastrophic in terms of race time. Before Hamilton pitted, they had cost him 10 seconds to Verstappen, and it was just too much to make up, even with the world champion struggling with his brakes and not able to drive as he wished. And don't forget the extra ride height he was carrying compared to Hamilton as well. Given Verstappen was not as quick as usual, would Mercedes have actually been able to hold him off if they'd gone for a 2-stop? They might be able to tell from their simulations, but they'll certainly never admit it to us if they could. From the outside though, considering the speed Hamilton was catching Verstappen at the end of the race, it certainly looked like they could have. After the race, Alpine's Pierre Gasly shed some light on just how bad a decision the one-stop was. Charles came to me on the grid before the race and asked if I'm going for a one-stop, and I said no effing way. The errors didn't end there though. Even with the compromise strategy, Hamilton should have crossed the finish line first at the Circuit of the Americas. Instead, he finished 2.2 seconds behind Verstappen, and that gap was massively influenced by pit stops. Not pit stop strategy, just pure and simple pit stop time. Hamilton's time stationary for his 2 stops was 3.6 seconds and 3.4 seconds. Sounds pretty quick for changing 4 tyres, right? My garage normally takes half an hour. Compare it with the fastest pit stop of the day though by Alpine at 2.2 seconds and Red Bull's fastest stops being 2.4 and 2.5 seconds, it's pretty lousy. If we look at the total time in the pit lane, which gives a more representative look at time lost, Lewis Hamilton spent 49.564 seconds getting his tyres changed during the race. Max took 48.73 seconds. That 0.834 seconds of difference might not have got Lewis ahead of Max on track, but it would have made a huge difference. Wolff said the issues that Mercedes faces are related to equipment rather than human error, but he says the time may have come now where it needs to change its approach because others are gaining too much. Our mindset in the last 12 years, we don't need to be world champions in pit stops, he said. We need to avoid very slow pit stops, and it's coming to a situation now where we realise that it has got so competitive. We just need to ramp up our game up there. Clearly, there's work for Mercedes to do at pit stops, but we aren't done yet. After the race, Sky's Anthony Davidson did a deep dive on Hamilton's driving during the race and found a big mistake that cost him a chunk of time. When you're so close like that, you have to start looking at little details, said the former F1 driver. One of these moments came for Lewis at turn 11. This was a pretty costly lockup and error there, and that critical moment of the race, you had drivers there pitting in front of him, trying to do the undercut. Verstappen was the first of that trio out front doing it. I think this must have been at least half a second's worth in just that corner alone, running so wide on the marbles. On dying tyres, locking up into a corner is an unfortunate error that is partly Hamilton's and partly the fault of the team for making him run so long on that first set of tyres. You can't question Hamilton's technical ability, but perhaps if a driver like Fernando Alonso had been in the car in his place, he would have told the team he was pitting instead of staying out and complaining about his tyres for 3 laps. Despite all of this, there could still have been a chance for Hamilton to take the checkered flag in Austin, if it weren't for his fellow disqualified driver, Charles Leclerc. Davidson thought that the time taken to pass the Ferrari was arguably the biggest blow to Hamilton's race. Watching a replay of lap 43, he said, "It was unfortunate timing behind Leclerc. He was on medium tyres, hunting him down. Leclerc is trying to do the one-stop strategy here," he explained while watching them both head to turn 1. "If he had just got him in this corner, he would have saved heaps of time. He wasn't quite close enough. He tried to go around the outside of turn 2, but he didn't quite have the momentum and couldn't quite do the switch back as effectively as he would have loved to. He had to follow Leclerc all the way through this high-speed section, losing time hand over fist. Maybe another 6 to 7 tenths in that whole sequence. Maybe even a second because Leclerc was that slow. This really was a weekend of what could have been for Mercedes. If Hamilton had crossed the line in first place, and he should have, it would have been an incredible achievement for Mercedes even with the disqualification. We don't know how much of a difference the ride height made to Max or Lewis, but being that close to Red Bull was unthinkable earlier in the year. Instead, we have to look at the negatives on a weekend that Mercedes should have won. Are you surprised by just how wrong it went for Mercedes in Austin? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.